This bill remains as flawed today as it was when it first appeared before the House. The purpose, as stated in the Act, is as dense as it is brief, to provide a framework for the regulation of the electricity industry. The bill claims to reform various areas of the electricity sector, to increase market competition and to ensure security of supply. It seeks to modify government arrangements by replacing the Electricity Authority with a commission, more independent. It will allow lines businesses back into retailing, and it will reconfigure some of the assets of the three SOEs, Meridian, Mighty Power, River Power and Genesis amongst themselves. The committee heard 91 submissions. Many opposed provisions of the bill or cast doubt on their likely efficacy. These warnings were largely ignored by government, whose mind had been set long before the committee process. We have argued before that this bill is simply another round of marginal tinkering with the problematic electricity industry. We contended that the underlying challenge was missing. This was the need for a genuine regulatory framework that will make the playing field level for more sustainable, renewable energy. The government was, we said, in danger of missing the whole point. The government ignored this as well. This bill is significant beyond its own terms. It is symptomatic of the general approach of the government to energy in general. The Minister's draft energy strategy confirms the public's fear that ideological blinkers are preventing this government from moving purposefully towards a low-carbon economy. The Minister's Petroleum Action Plan of late 2009 was in the same vein, to unlock the potential of our fossil fuel resources. The Minister's thinking that lies behind this electricity bill was on display at the New Zealand Petroleum Conference held in Auckland earlier this week, which I attended. In his keynote address, Mr Brownlee advanced a breathtaking comment. He invited New Zealanders to consider the potential for an accelerated oil and gas discovery program that can be achieved in an environmentally responsible way. In fact, he went further and told us to mend our ways of thinking. People need, he said, to shift their thinking on exactly this issue. The development of New Zealand's natural resources and the protection of the environment are not mutually exclusive. It is only through a strong economy that New Zealand can afford the expenditure required to look after and improve our environment. So in this suicidal logic, we should mine and burn more oil and gas, hastening climate change, in order to become rich enough to deal with climate change. Recently, I questioned the Minister in the House over what phased milestones he had in place to achieve his stated goal of reaching 90% electricity generation from renewable sources by 2025. His reply was that his government did not determine the investment decisions needed to increase the availability of renewably generated activity. Rather, it sets the regulatory and policy environment in which investments are made, such as in amended RMA and the moderated ETS. Phased milestones, he said, would be possible only if we lived in a command and control style economy. We do not, he observed. Mr Brownlee is correct. We do not live in a command and control economy. We never have, although a national Prime Minister came closest 3 decades back. But we do live in a country that is part of an unsustainable global economy. Its most obvious symptom is dangerous climate change from excessive carbon emissions. Switching to renewable energy sources and developing a low-carbon economy within a short time period is a condition of enduring economic welfare, both to New Zealand and the world. It is generally recognised that this switch must be completed within 2 decades at the latest. New Zealand's goal of 90% renewable electricity is one part of that transformation. Identification of phased milestones is a legitimate part of attaining that goal. It does not reflect Kremlin thinking. It reflects an agreed aspiration through consensus to ensure that a final goal is more likely to be attained with public and private sectors working together. Most people and most governments and organisations do that. The government has a phased milestone signed by the National Cabinet in 1997 in the Kyoto Protocol to achieve the goal signed by the national government at Rio in 1992. That goal is stabilising the global climate at a level that is not dangerous to the planet's life support systems. The UN has phased milestones under the well-known Millennium Development Goals. They are to halve global poverty improve educational attainment, and increase maternal health and longevity. We all have milestones, Minister. It is not a betrayal of the private sector as the driver of the national economy to lay down midpoint milestones to measure how well we are moving towards a stated target. In fact, the government has milestones itself, or at least has access to them. The Electricity Commission's draft Statement of Opportunities, released in July, is intended to provide interested parties with independent information to consider in assessing the potential for grid management efficiencies and, in particular, investment in upgrades and transmission alternatives. The statement, says the Chairman of the Commission, is not a plan for the future development of the grid or of generation. Rather, it is a set of scenarios as to how the generation and transmission of electricity may develop given a range of reasonable assumptions. The scenarios show a trend for each year for all energy sources between 2010 and 2040. Each renewable source, geothermal, hydro, wind, tidal, solar, is expected to increase. The government and the public will have this available to assess the effectiveness of the energy strategy over the next decade. The policies of the previous government, through the thermal power station moratorium and its ETS, were broadly on target for the market to deliver a 90% renewable goal by 2027. The Green Party's Getting There document of August 2009 showed how we could achieve 90% by 2025. This government's repeal of the moratorium and the weakening of the ETS has left that in tatters. Without a clear signal through government leadership, the market will not deliver on time. The Minister's energy strategy speaks of fostering the deployment of new renewable sources such as marine and solar. How the government plans to foster marine energy is left unclear. I say to the Minister, if all you do is state an aspirational goal, leave it to the Commission to postulate scenarios based on assumptions, and leave unclear how you are going to foster new renewables, you will simply not attain the target. Yet attaining the target is an imperative for our children's generation, and yours is the ministerial responsibility. Here are a few personal thoughts on how to facilitate the attainment of a 90% target. Assume a population growth of 0.8% per annum and electricity generation growth of 2% per annum. Under that scenario, national electricity generation would rise from 780 petajoules in 2010 to 1,050 in 2025. Based on these assumptions, it is possible to picture a scenario where a goal of 90% renewable can be achieved by 2025. Hydro might remain static at around 55 to 60%, with some ageing stations being decommissioned. Geothermal might remain static at 13%. Wind power could, with a level playing field, increase over 15 years from its current 4% to, say, 12%. And tidal power, possibly the most promising of all, might, with supportive action of the kind the government extends to the petroleum industry, be introduced and grow from nothing to, say, 10%. This is not a command plan. It is a heuristic tool to help policymakers and the public envisage a sustainable future. It also shows the magnitude of the challenge of switching to a low-carbon economy when energy consumption is growing exponentially. The reality will not be precisely like this, but unless we all, householders, voters, farms, companies, local authorities, government, have some idea of the phase-in, phase-out trend we need as a nation, we shall never get there. And the only way to get there is a robust carbon price signal for the market economy to react. There the government is failing us as well. Instead of a whole-of-government strategy, envisaging a switch to low-carbon basis for our power sources, the Minister is content to tinker with the imperfect framework of the electricity sector in the name of an outmoded notion of market competition. The Green Party will be opposing this bill.